Well, Pete, thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
All right, for people watching, Pete is a vice president at Holden Advisors. He's the head of our sales consulting practice. So that part of our business includes things like sales strategy, negotiation coaching, training, and large scale account planning. So in that part of the business, we had a story recently with a client that I thought, why don't we get on video and talk about it? It kind of lends itself more to a conversation with all the different angles to this negotiation. And here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Good prompt. I think we actually get this kind of question fairly frequently, which is, hey, we've got a key renewal coming up, or we've got an opportunity that we have a shot to appreciably change the trajectory of our business. And we want to make sure we're going through this deal cycle carefully. And so we typically engage on sort of a coaching or advisory basis where we can deploy our IP and kind of help them think through their specific situation.
Yeah, so in this case, it happened to be a negotiation with a very large retailer. So can you tell us a bit about the situation kind of as you came into it?
Yeah, sure. I guess first for context, we were working with a client who's in data or information services. So they're kind of selling data and valuable productivity and efficiency plays for all sorts of industries and companies, specifically around human resources, typically. In any case, they were negotiating with a big box retailer, of which there's only a few, but all of them have world-class procurement organizations. So I think that much is clear, particularly given the importance of supply chain and cost leadership in those industries. And so this type of renewal had a lot of visibility both within our client, because it was a multi-year agreement that was renewing, and it was likely also important for the big box retailer because it was a fairly high value contract, multi-million dollars annually. So yeah, the situation was that this renewal was coming to an end for these specific set of services, and they were wanting to get ahead. Our client was wanting to get ahead of just when the negotiation would take place. And the way it actually started was a preemptive move by the big box retailer to request that our client participate in an auction to purchase these services. And that's if you're not familiar, kind of a reverse auction is when you're kind of submitting a price at which you're willing to provide a product or a service. And it can be really stressful for our client side, for the seller, because you feel like everyone else kind of in the world is also by their computer saying, yeah, I'll provide this to you for $1 million, and then the other one says I'll provide it for 900K, and at some point, who blinks first and says they'll do it for a cheaper price. And it's fairly scary. And what we actually recommended is that our client not participate, which initially kind of came out was received very flatly, I'll say, because they were just worried they were gonna not even get a chance to participate in renewing the business.
Right. So what happened after that point?
So after that, we kind of explained our rationale, and the rationale was that they've been, a decade plus long partner, and were actually respected within the big boxes organization. And then this type of procurement vehicle really doesn't give them any chance to talk about the value added services that they provide. It was simply about the price. And so that was a little dissonant from the way the relationship had been historically structured. So by not participating, what it actually did was open the door to a conversation that said, hey, we're not going to participate, but here's what we will do. And that allowed kind of a two-way conversation about having a proposal and almost a sole source negotiation. And by that, I mean, the big box retailer was just participating with our client to say, okay, well, what are the terms of this deal? So then you kind of know that's a signal, right? Because now you're probably the preferred supplier and you're in an advantaged position.
Yeah. Some of these things must be so scary because there's so much on the line in the partnership and then in the revenue expected from it. There's just a lot in the mix. But I think in this case, obviously you wouldn't recommend that for all situations, but in this case, that was the move.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great point. So there's, we talk at Holden Advisors about different buyer types, and just briefly we can talk through them. Kind of what you suggested right there was a price buyer, where you wouldn't just say, hey, we're not going to participate in your game, because that's literally how they're going to make the decision, simply just the price. And so in that scenario, it'd be a bad move if you really did want to win the business at that cheap price. Then you have value buyers who appreciate your ROI. You have relationship buyers that appreciate an ROI, but also your expertise and advice on how they should solve their problem. And then at the top end, you have the poker players who are, either a value buyer or a relationship buyer, but pretend like they only care about price. And so that's where kind of the poker playing and game comes in, because you have to sniff out, do they actually care about more than price or not? Typically, it's only 10 to 20% of the time that you encounter a price buyer. Often that can be in, government situations. It can be sometimes in, normal procurement situations, but it often becomes pretty clear because they make themselves pretty clear about what they want or not.
Right. And then it also seems like there's a lot more poker playing happening than one might think.
For sure. Yeah. The way it breaks down, I mean, value buyers are probably 60% of the buyer types, and then you have 20 to 30% in relationship, and then 10 to 20% in price buyers. So certainly, if that's 100%, then really a high percentage of those value and relationship buyers are also masquerading as poker players.
Right. So in this project, kind of the first big move was not participating in the reverse auction.
Yeah. So exactly.
Yeah.
And that opened the door to an actual conversation where you can talk about value and here are the things we do. Now, the second challenge here was that because the big box retailer was ready to renew the contract, it kind of was at the negotiating table already. So price, even though they wanted the value services, became the true focus, where if they had started the conversation 6-9 months earlier, there would have been a little more appetite to hear about why there's financial impact by choosing, our client. And when you say that at the end of the road towards the negotiation, there's not a lot of appetite for it. And so that kind of made it like pushing a rock uphill sometimes. So if you think about the buyer's decision cycle from, your discovery and qualify to proposing a deal and then negotiating and closing it, at the very beginning, when you're kind of in the discovery qualify, here's what we can provide. That's sort of when they want to know, your end buyer, like, what do you do for me? How are you different? How are you better? Whereas when you come down to the last bit, which by the way, they probably researched you 90% of the way already, they just want to know about the price because they already think you're qualified and you're going to provide these types of value. So that was an additional challenge.
Yeah. It also, I would imagine at the very end of the cycle is where people pretend like it's all about price, because that's the time where the price gets really discussed the most.
Yep. That's where the poker playing behavior comes out. And that's where you need to kind of understand the tactics that a poker player would take versus what a value buyer or relationship buyer would take, or versus price buyer as well. Yeah.
So in this situation, when you got into the conversations about sole source negotiations, where did that take them kind of in the process?
Yeah, so ultimately it was still several months of that negotiation process. And they would bring in different stakeholders, the big box retailer. You might have been talking to certain individuals in the business versus towards the end, when the procurement organization comes in, you're really talking to very much the buying organization. And so even that switch tells you something about both. It might just be the course of action that a given company takes, but often when that's the case, if a CXO can't make a purchase decision and close the deal, you often know that it might be that you kind of had the deal, but now you have to jump through these other hoops to get there. And their goals are really to take their pound of flesh. They want their 20% average target discount from whatever it is you're offering. and you're going to have to defend that price in the best ways that you know how. And typically you want to talk about why there's financial impact, but you need to also provide multiple different tiers of what you offer. So inevitably they ask for discounts multiple times, multiple ways, demanded them. And really the strategy we recommend is often yes, but, or yes, and it's going to have to be a different offer. That's fine. We do have a service for you, but you miss out on these key features or these key value drivers that you have now, or we have this different version for you. If that's really what you need, we can fit your budget at that lower price. So a lot of those trade-offs are what's happening in real time.
Yeah. And in the course of this negotiation, which, as you said, was like several months, what were the different, how did those things happen in time? Like the give gets or the tiers of offers, what changed?
It's funny.
In time?
Sometimes if we were to work, in a pricing or product engagement with the customer, then often we want to set those things into actually how the product is structured. So you kind of have your good, better, best. Many of people are familiar with that. So you kind of have those trade-offs built in. Sometimes during a negotiation, though, you have to effectively design those in real time, kind of build the plane while you're flying it to build those trade-offs in. Because sometimes there's asks that you didn't anticipate that are around, you might be giving a tiered volume pricing for, different transaction volumes in different situations. And they might actually want something that's either more variable because they know their usage is going to go down in the next year, or they might ask for something that's really fixed. And you don't want to necessarily, you won't be able to have all of those permutations worked out ahead of time, but you can often land on something that gives them a little bit of that certainty that they need in some cases, but also provides you with a risk premium for getting a set price. So some of those just happen in real time. And that's, I think, why these large B2B deals can be so customized, because all of these nuanced terms get looked at really carefully in a custom way.
Yeah. With this renewal, did you end up changing what tier they thought they were on? Like, how did things play out from that perspective?
Yeah, so they did have a tiered schedule for kind of certain transaction volumes, but ultimately it went towards something that was like a two-part component. So they had a very fixed component that gave them certainty around a piece with some overage charges, so they could share on the upside. So both sides were sort of protected from the worst case scenario in their view.
Yeah. And would you say, like, towards the end, were there other, like, the reverse auction decision strikes me as like a high stress kind of, you're sweating moment in terms of decisions that were made. As things progressed, were there other moments like that in the project?
Yeah, all the time. And I think ironically, it's internally as much as externally, because the actual interactions with the end buyer end up being pretty structured and on a cadence. It might be every 2 weeks, or here's another call. And oftentimes we're not even participating on that. So that's really left up to our client and their account teams to have those conversations. And we're kind of working them before and after around those events. Almost more stressful is internal, because you have different people in the organization that say, this is a key account, this is critical business, we need to win it at all costs. And they're sort of coming in at the last moment and almost eroding the work you're trying to do to defend value and set a price that captures that value. And they kind of have a point of view of, we need this business and renew
Just give
it
them a
soon.
discount or whatever.
Yeah. So you kind of, even within your own team, there's a lot of different points of view about it. So that becomes a challenge. I think the account team has a lot of cooks in the kitchen, especially as it gets towards the business end of these big opportunities.
When you came into this project, do you remember how much, like, the scope that was originally kind of at stake for the account size?
Yeah, I mean, it was tens of millions per year.
Yeah.
So it was quite large. And as a percentage of their business, it was a large account. It wasn't the largest account, but it was an important negotiation for them. Absolutely. And then as far as the scope throughout, yeah, I think that brings up a good point where there's almost the customization aspect. Sometimes you want to offer things on an innovative standpoint, because it's not just whatever the rate sheet is for these 5 SKUs and this is what I want to buy. It might be that they appreciate you because you're able to innovate with them or develop solutions that they need and integrate with their technology. ERP and CRM systems are, there's major vendors out there that produce them, but the way you set them up custom to your business means that you actually need other partners to make sure that they're helping you be more productive and win more business or perform more efficiently. So if you have that mindset or capability to be able to partner with someone and kind of develop new solutions over time, that's something that you can leverage in that negotiation. So there was a kind of an innovation partnership that I think was appreciated from both sides of that particular negotiation.
Yeah. So what was the result of this whole project?
Well, I mean, we're talking about it because ultimately they did renew and win that business, which is fantastic. And it was north of, $20 million annually in this deal, which is fantastic, of course. But I think there's, a few lessons that probably come out of it. So in this, our client was very satisfied in this particular case, but I guess we could probably talk about some key takeaways and what might others do when you're approaching these big deals. And probably the first one is just knowing your worth. We're Holden Advisors is a value-based pricing shop. We also have, the sales practices, the other side of the commercial spectrum, but those two are extremely linked. And the foundation that underpins both of them is this notion of financial value in B2B. You're either going to help your client to increase their revenue, decrease their cost, or mitigate some sort of risk or liability. And so if you know what those are in dollars and cents of what you actually provide, you have a much better sense of whether you can give or concede in a certain term or not. So if you have some credibility and confidence to support your price with actual information that says you will actually experience these results, or we have measured these results even better over the past 10 years, and we tell you about it every quarter, so we already agree that this is true, then you really have a leg to stand on. So that's probably the first most important thing.
Yeah. It's funny because I think you hear people connecting dots about the value that they bring. But I think one of the things that I'm hearing in examples like this is there's like, how do you do that all along the way in the process of the whole sales cycle, so that it's not just at the last minute when it becomes about price and then you're trying to defend at the buzzer, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I gave the example earlier about the late stage of this negotiation. So they're trying to talk value, but it's a little dissonant with, talking price, which is the true interest of what the procurement org wants now. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to just say 6 months ago, you should have been talking about it. You can actually build that into the cadence that you approached your, all accounts with. It could be in your QBRs. There's kind of a value scorecard, or basically the benefits that you bring, and you have that as part of very specific times that you're talking to them, and make sure there's the right stakeholders in the room that would care about that. Because if all you talk to is the procurement person, they care about the cost and saving on the cost, whereas if you're talking to the right stakeholder in the business, they'll care about those other elements of value that are increasing revenue or decreasing their costs in a more tangible way.
I guess in these longer partnerships too, that's could potentially be the genesis of a lot of co-creation, when they're understanding what you're bringing, and then you're understanding more deeply kind of what they care about. I would guess
that's right. Yeah, and they're absolutely, you're more likely to hear about that again, like during the course of an ongoing relationship. If you have a multi-year agreement, it's in year 1 and 2 are probably the best times to kind of really do that discovery and investigation of what are the pain points and how might we solve them. Yeah, maybe it's just an adjacent service that is already built and ready to go, but in many cases, these accounts that are this large already have 80% plus of the things that you sell, and it's hard to grow them in any appreciable way by just saying, hey, can you get our last product on board? And like, maybe, but it's probably not going to make that big of a difference.
Do you see, I'm just curious, like, what are the other big mistakes that you see in these large negotiations?
Yeah, I think
common things that people do.
Yeah, so I guess, just the antithesis of what to do. If you don't understand your quantified value, that's certainly a big mistake. The next one is not understanding like the buyer type you're dealing with. So in this case, I would say it was a value buyer that very much was behaving like a poker player. So they were kind of acting like the price buyer, but they were exhibiting poker playing behavior. So if you don't understand that, you might take the wrong tactic. So for example, if you think you're truly dealing with a price buyer, the way to win with a price buyer is to give them the lowest price. Take out everything value add and give them the most bare bones, basic service or offering product that you have. And it's almost more of a commodity play at that point. And some businesses are really set up to thrive in that environment, others are not. So if you're kind of make your competitive strategy via differentiation, winning a bunch of deals from price buyers is probably not really going to support you long term. So in those situations, if you can understand that you're actually dealing with a price buyer up front, then you probably don't need to focus on those. Whereas you actually do want to talk to the majority of customers that are value buyers or relationship buyers, but you also need to therefore lead with why you can help them improve the business. You don't want to just talk about the fact that we can deliver you a good price.
Yeah, and I guess missing those signals overall is a whole category of mishaps.
It is, and actually, I think we talked about how price buyers only represent 10 to 20% of the share of customers out there, and that's very consistent across industries, by the way. But when you ask sellers what percentage of your customers that you talk to and prospects are price buyers, you're going to hear answers like 50%, 60%. Everybody cares about price, and to some degree that's by design. They want you to think that you need to present them a competitive price, which is fine. You just need to make sure you're fencing that and keeping that price value in alignment, so you're not offering the premium version for the basic price.
Right. Can you explain a bit more about fencing, just in general, what that means, how we think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like what people think about day to day is just your car. So even just the way you structure the fact that you buy a baseline vehicle or SUV, but then you can get a premium winter package or a navigation package or premium speakers. So those are very distinct things where you can pay more to have those packages or features, but you can't just pay that. You can't just say, I want the premium winter package and not also pay something for that. So I guess said another way, it might be that the equivalent way is that the dealer had a car that had everything: winter package, navigations, premium sound, and they said it's $50,000. And you said, oh, well, I want a discount. They might say, well, we can give you a $40,000 car. We have one over there. It's the same thing, but it lacks these three things. So
Right.
that's really where it is. You're able to very tangibly align price and value by not just saying, yeah, sure, we'll give you the $50,000 car for $40,000. You're saying, okay, I need to take these things away. And that's really built into just the offering that is presented to customers. So in B2B, it's often not features. It could be like in an enterprise software company, there are, or B2B SaaS, really specific features that are aligned to your good, better, and best. It could be that in a more commodity industry, you're talking about services like inventory management or rush delivery, and other types of payment terms that kind of fence those different levels of what you might offer. And
Makes it really clear, I guess, what you can take away to go up or down
that's
in
right.
value. I guess what's surprising to me, but that happens more often than I realized, is people end up giving value away and just giving the discount in order to keep the client or keep the account. And then that whole thing, that the things just kind of collapse,
Yeah, and I think that happens for a number of reasons. One of them is just, you could say it's human nature of not wanting to have the conflict and keep that, solid relationship between you and your customer. I think there's the fact that procurement teams often have a decades-long lead in terms of training and tactics over sellers. And so they're able to kind of deploy the threat of not buying you. And that feels really real to a seller who's often comped on making a sale or not. Revenue-driven people, it makes sense that if you can give a discount and you lock up a sale, it's great. And then I think that leads to the final piece is sometimes the incentives of a salesperson in a company might be not necessarily aligned, where the salesperson wants to make a sale. The company may talk about, hey, why don't you sell this at a higher margin? Look, your peer next door is selling at a higher margin, but truly, if that person's compensated on just more or less making the sale or not, maybe a very commission oriented system, that those things are a little bit dissonant.
Yeah. There's two different things that maybe we can do these in a separate video, because as you're talking, I think one thing that's coming to mind is how many, as a seller, how many different things you're navigating for internal alignment before you even get to the conversations with procurement or whoever's on the other side.
Yeah.
That's like, there's a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely. I think you can work backwards from what are the tactics and skills you need to negotiate a deal more effectively at more advantageous terms for you. And then there's all of the supporting infrastructure that is about how do we design the product and service and offering such that we have these built-in fences that make it really easy for the salesperson. How do we set a price that aligns to that use case and the value that we deliver to the customer? And how do we set up that organization so that those incentives make sense for both the person that's on the front line to talk to customers and the company's results? Yeah, absolutely.
There's like everything that fits into that. And then the second thing is, like, you as a coach, how do you teach people to pick up on these tells or the signals? What are the signals to look for? Like, how do you teach someone to fish in terms of negotiations, which is probably a whole other conversation that would be good.
Yeah, it is. And I think the short answer is, like, we have, at Holden Advisors, an established framework that talks about this. But I think even when you take a seller through, one opportunity and you're pointing out the reasons of the behaviors of what's driving you to believe that they're a poker player and actually a relationship buyer, then they start to pick up on that and they learn it for their other opportunities. You might be working with them on one, but they have 10 other accounts or 50 other accounts, and then they can use those skills to kind of uncover the same thing. It's sort of like, without realizing something, it's like feedback, without knowing something about yourself, you can't make a change. The same deal on, just when you're at work.
It's like all awareness. That's good.
Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, thank you. I think that's a good place to pause. I've got a list of other things for our next one, but I appreciate you taking the time and good chatting.
Perfect. Look forward to the next time.
All right. Thanks.
All right.